Colonel Sharp. We have an inbound unidentified infiltrator 10 miles out.
Unidentified aircraft. We will escort you to U.S. Sunset.
4500X, something's not right.
Whoa. Radar's jammed. It's coming from the chopper.
This video is brought to you by Manta Sleep. Manta Sleep make the world's best sleep masks and functional sleep accessories. Their range of masks are made from soft, breathable materials that provide 100% blackout for better sleep with zero pressure on the eyelids and adjustable straps for a personalized fit. From their cool mask, which soothes eyes and sinuses with its evenly distributed cooling system, the warm mask, which alleviates stress in dry eyes, powered by natural steam, to the aroma mask with scents that gently calm and relax you as you sleep, and many more. Manta Sleep is here to facilitate better sleep. They're providing FCE viewers with a special discount, so head on over to mantasleep.com and use the code FCE to get 10% off your next order. While he might not make the kind of movies that'll sweep at the Cannes Film Festival, Michael Bay makes big movies, and the guy knows how to make a popcorn flick. The King of Explosions has been responsible for some of the biggest blockbusters of the past few decades, from Bad Boys, Armageddon, The Rock, to 2007's Transformers, which kicked off a whole bombastic franchise. Hey guys, what's happening? Niet here with Film Comics Explained, and today we're exploring the legacy of Transformers, Michael Bay's live-action adaptation of the franchise produced by American toy company Hasbro and Japanese toy company Takara Tomy.
Unfortunately, my great-great-grandfather, the genius that he was, wound up going blind and crazy in a psycho ward, drawing these strange symbols and babbling on about some giant Iceman that he thought he discovered.
The story in the first film is relatively simple. There's an ancient mystical cube called the Allspark that can grant sentience to mechanical objects. This is what gives the giant robot racers, the Autobots and Decepticons life. Optimus Prime explains that Megatron, the evil leader of the Decepticons, betrayed his kind and started a civil war on Cybertron over the Allspark, which ended up getting knocked out into space, eventually landing on Earth. Cut to thousands of years later, present time for our heroes, the Decepticons have finally figured out where the Allspark landed, and begin their assault to retrieve it. Meanwhile, regular old guy Shia LaBeouf's Sam Witwicky, grandson of Archibald Witwicky, an explorer that discovered Megatron frozen in ice, is pursued by the Decepticons that wish to know the location of their leader, kicking off Sam's fated journey. Luckily for him, the yellow Chimera he just bought is actually the Autobot, Bumblebee, which has been charged as his protector. Following this discovery, Sam, his crush Megan Fox's Mikaela, and a ton of US Army troops must fight alongside the Autobots in order to stop the Decepticons from retrieving the Allspark and destroying the world.
Steven Spielberg called me and he said, I'd like to do Transformers. And I'm like, okay, all right, I'll think about it. Hung up. I'm not doing that movie. That's what I said to myself. I'm not doing a toy movie. Something in Transformers just struck me when I said to myself, if you can make this real and edgy, and I saw a couple images that were towards the direction that they would like to take this, and I'm like, that's really interesting.
The story takes some liberties with the original Transformers IP. For starters, it's a bit more adult-oriented. That isn't to say that kids can't enjoy Bay's Transformers, but it's definitely far less cartoonish than other entries in the franchise, and much hornier than your average 80s Transformers fare. See every time Megan Fox is on screen.
Got a high-rise double-pump carburetor. That's pretty impressive, Sam.
Double pump?
It squirts the fuel in so you can go faster.
So listen, I was wondering if I could ride you home. Give you a ride home.
Compare it with the 1986 animated Transformers film. While it had its darker moments, it was still basically just a big flashy toy commercial. It was also rated PG compared to Bay's PG-13 adaptation.
Bumblebee was, in the 80s, a Volkswagen Bug.
We knew that he was originally a Volkswagen, but it was not really an option for Michael because it wasn't badass enough.
I just was never going to use the Volkswagen Bug for Bumblebee.
We said, as long as he's yellow, let's find some cues that will harken back to what people remember, but let's not have that be as far as you can go.
The Autobots themselves took on different forms in the film. Most notably, Bumblebee is depicted as a yellow Camaro. Traditionally though, he appeared as a Volkswagen Beetle. Producer Don Murphy specifically mentioned that they avoided making him a Beetle due to the recent Herbie Fully Loaded film. In the comics, he can also talk, as opposed to only being able to speak via radio transmissions. In the film, it's explained that he lost his voice back on planet Cybertron. By the end of the movie though, his voice is fixed again, though he still often opts to communicate through the radio, even in Revenge of the Fallen.
Yeah, you know you're in trouble.
You still having voice problems?
Playing it off.
The majority of the human characters shown in the film are actually original characters. Sam Witwicky is totally new to the series, along with his ancestor Archibald Witwicky. Michaela is also new to the franchise, though, funnily enough, Sam's second girlfriend Carly, who stepped in after Megan Fox left the franchise, was actually a minor character in the cartoons.
From the very beginning, we knew we had fans following this. From the first time that a piece of art got out to the fact that Michael Bay's computer was hacked and the script got up online.
The design started getting out on the internet. People were saying, oh, Michael Bay, you wrecked my childhood. Damn you, Michael Bay.
Like most Transformers fans, when I first saw the designs of the movie, I was like, what? They changed everything. It's completely different. What's going on here?
On the one hand, the totally original aspects of the story make it easier for casual moviegoers to sit back, relax, and watch some stuff blow up. On the other, some Transformers traditionalists turn their noses up at some of the new lore. That being said, in reality, most of the story elements of the film were loosely based in established Transformers canon. For example, the life-giving Allspark is a riff off the creation matrix that was present in the original Generation 1 continuity. The producers decided to change the name so as not to be confused with the Matrix franchise. The later Beast Wars Transformers series called it the Spark, which likely added to the new Allspark moniker.
No. Nasty critter. That's the watch that killed Hitler. Don't screw with it.
The later movies tend to add some really crazy stuff to the canon, like introducing the Order of the Witwickens and claiming that the Autobots helped Harriet Tubman escape slavery. But the very first Transformers movie actually doesn't stray that far from established mythos.
75% of all adult men had a major Transformers experience in their life. So you've got this great group of people who all grew up with the brand and are now working on the creation of Transformers the movie.
Even with the changes to the story and new additions, there are plenty of nods to the original franchise. Perhaps the most exciting old Easter egg is Optimus Prime's voice actor, Peter Cullen, who voiced Optimus Prime in the original 80s cartoons.
Autobots, transform! Roll out!
Even hardcore fans who were skeptical about the 2007 remake were thrilled for Cullen's return. Cullen had actually also voiced the character of Ironhide in the 1984 film, but Jess Harnell ended up portraying Ironhide this time round. Frank Welker, the original Megatron, was considered to reprise his role as well, but Michael Bay ultimately felt that his voice didn't quite match up with their rendering of the character, and Hugo Weaving was brought on to portray the leader of the Decepticons instead.
Frank Welker, I kept putting his voice to our gigantic Megatron, and it just didn't fit.
You fool, Starscream. You fail me yet again, Starscream.
In addition to Cullen's return, the Transformers veteran Charlie Adler also makes an appearance as Starscream. Adler had previously provided various voices for the Transformers cartoons, including Silverbot and Trigger Happy.
Well, the appeal of this movie goes back to my children's childhoods. I would get some Transformer toys, and then we would play on the floor, and I remember my own experience with Transformer toys, and so this was a shared experience.
Believe it or not, Hasbro had first planned to make a live-action film based on the G.I. Joe toy franchise with Sony. However, producer Don Murphy explained that once the US invasion of Iraq had happened, it became kind of clear that doing a movie called G.I. Joe was probably not the smartest idea at that point. Of course, by 2009, the live-action G.I. Joe Rise of the Cobra was released, so it didn't take too long for that toy franchise to get a shot at the big screen as well. According to Murphy, it was producer Carol Munro, who had previously been in charge of Hasbro films like various My Little Pony shorts, that was the first to suggest reviving Transformers. From there, Murphy teamed up with producer Tom DeSanto, a fan of the series. DeSanto had previously assisted on the revivals of the X-Men franchise, and the two began working with Simon Furman, who had worked on the Marvel Transformers comics. They essentially sought to create a story based on the first generation of 80s comics that Furman had helmed.
You have to totally respect what's been created, and I knew if I were to put these characters in the real world, they'd have to fit in the real world, and they have to be much more intricate.
The first draft of the Transformers film was written by John Rogers, who'd previously penned early drafts of the 2004 Catwoman screenplay and created the Jackie Chan Adventures. His initial script was based off of DeSanto and Murphy's idea to make a more serious film that focused on conflict between the Autobots and Decepticons. DeSanto specifically stated that they sought to make the robot's personality as realistic as possible. To him, Optimus Prime and Megatron weren't robots, but almost Shakespearean characters that had all this drama and background. He told a Latino review when the film was still in development that you're going to believe that that truck or that car is actually standing there, but you're gonna care too, and that's the key.
I think everybody likes the idea of taking something that you're familiar with and turning it into something that you're not as familiar with, like a 18-wheeler semi into Optimus Prime.
Once Steven Spielberg signed on as executive producer in 2005, however, the story would change. Spielberg stressed that the story needed to be more relatable. The first thing that he mentioned to the writers was that they should make the story about a boy in his car, because that's something that everyone can relate to. From there, Alex Kurtzman and Roberto Orci were hired to rewrite the script so that the characters Sam and Michaela would be the primary points of view for the story. It was essential for us to know what the human story would be, just as a starting point, and then to extrapolate the rest, Orci told IGN in 2007. Realism was important. We knew going into this that people think of this as a toy or cartoon, and yet there's elements of fun from that you didn't want to lose. So it was absolutely walking a fine line between making it as real as possible and also keeping a sense of fun. In this rewrite though, the gang went a little overboard and initially made it so that the Transformers didn't talk at all. Orci stated that the studio was concerned that we might not be able to make that believable in a live-action translation, and ultimately we all concluded that that was just too big of a reconceptualization that at that point it ceased to be Transformers. You might as well call it GoBots at that point or whatever. So it wasn't until the second or third draft that we really started having them speak. Finally, in 2005, Michael Bay was signed on to direct the film. Interestingly enough, he initially dismissed the film, stating,
"I'm not doing a toy movie."
However, after going through Transformers school, as Bay called it, he changed his mind. Hasbro stepped in to explain the technical aspects of the bots and stressed how important it was that the Transformers were their own people, not pre-programmed. From here, Bay became interested and took on the role.
Michael is the type of guy that wants to shoot things messy, which I love, because you shoot the explosions or all the debris or anything on set. It makes it harder for us, but it's real.
We shot a plate of the real helicopter, but in this case, it ended up being easier just to remove that helicopter. This is what the background plate was. We essentially removed the real helicopter and then replaced it with our own.
George Lucas's visual effects studio, Industrial Light and Magic, were responsible for about 75% of the film's design and special effects. They created about 450 shots for the movie in total. The remaining quarter or so was done by Digital Domain, a studio that was partially founded by James Cameron. Digital Domain handled around 90 shots, mostly animating one-off bots like Dispenser, who transforms from a Mountain Dew vending machine, and the Nokia bot. While Hasbro did not have the authority to specifically veto any designs, they did work closely with Paramount Studios to work out the logistics. During the aforementioned Transformers school, they addressed complex issues like human interaction with a 40-foot robot and how to communicate. The CEO of Hasbro, Brian Goldner, was an executive producer on the film and was responsible for preserving the essence of the characters. He and Hasbro designer Aaron Archer worked extensively with the art department to ensure that the new Bumblebee design still felt like the original character, despite the significant design changes.
My favorite Transformer is Bumblebee.
It's always been Bumblebee.
There's 150 single parts on that robot. The whole robot was sculptured out of foam. We took molds off of them, made fiberglass parts, and when it stands up, it's actually about 18 feet tall.
When we got near the robot, it was just like, no way.
The robot can't move on camera, but we can position it in any position that Michael needs it.
I'm operating the Bumblebee airbags for movement.
The nature of the Transformers were all up to the production team. Generally speaking, an animation team will create a CGI model by first making a build of a model and then having a stand-in on set. And it must be noted that it's really difficult to create a stand-in for robots that are 30+ feet. ILM digital effects artist Ron Woodall explained that while they can get together car parts, we don't have any robots, so that's what made this project way harder than Michael Bay's 2001 film Pearl Harbor, where he had real planes to look at. Animation supervisor Scott Benzer described it thusly: "We start with the end result first, then work backwards from there. We'll start Bumblebee standing up in his pose and the composition of the shot, then we'll collapse him down into something of a car shape, where we fold his arms in and hover him down close to the street, and then we deal with what we have to fill in the in-between. Of course, that explanation makes it sound simple. However, in reality, an Autobot like Optimus Prime had over 10,000 moving components that needed to be animated smoothly. Compare that to the actual Optimus Prime toys, which only have about 50 moving pieces.
This is the classic G1 Optimus Prime, very much like it was made in the 80s. He had a very simple transformation, very easy to get from vehicle to robot.
Bay's trademark camera movements reportedly gave computer animators quite the challenge. Getting a robot to transform in the middle of a shaky, swooping camera shift is no easy feat. In order to achieve this, ILM created a backwards interface that allowed animators to develop rigging controls that allowed for custom transformations. According to Popular Mechanics, each transformation took about 6 months to fully design. The ILM team spent time studying the insides of various cars in order to give the Autobots and Decepticons realistic parts. After about a year, the crew reportedly assembled 60,217 vehicle parts, including bumpers, tires, gaskets, doors, tailpipes, engines, and more. Painters then applied 34,215 texture maps to said parts. Then the animators attached 144,341 rigging nodes to each lovingly crafted bot.
Because I'm a lighting buff, you know, and I would give dissertations at ILM of like, if you see a car, it's gonna have a hot spot, it's got flat here, it's got a long highlight there, and it's very confusing when you look at it.
Then there's one of the biggest design changes. Unlike most of his previous incarnations, which featured a metal mouthplate, Bay's Optimus Prime has big shiny metal lips and a fully animated face. This provided a unique challenge for animators. Supervising digital artist Dave Vogler and his modeling team had to create various lighting pieces for the jaws and cheeks, simulated pupils, and multi-segmented lips. In the end, Optimus Prime ended up having about 200 facial parts.
We wanted to have fighters and guys that could maneuver in ways that you'd never seen before.
We went into this development phase of showing how agile we could make the robots and still convey a sense of weight.
What we did was create a fighting style that represented the characters of each robot.
We would video these fights, and it would help the animators get their kind of movements down and how we wanted to execute certain fighting scenes.
With all that being said about the computer effects, it must be noted that the majority of the explosions and collisions in the film were all done practically. Real machine guns were fired throughout filming, and in the on-set documentary, you can see all the various shells being cleared away from the set.
Michael staged huge, logistically complicated scenes of massive destruction and explosions, and even when I was watching those dailies without the actual Transformers there, it was just eye candy.
The majority of the vehicle collisions and stunts were also done practically, as opposed to being animated. Stunt coordinator Kenny Bates recalls having various vehicles attached to cables so that they can control the collisions. When Michael Bay signed on to the film, he felt that the treatment was a bit too kiddie and introduced the militaristic elements to harden it up. As a result, the production team worked extensively with the US military. Producer Ian Bryce noted, "We would never have been able to make this movie without the willingness of the Defense Department to embrace this project. We're proud of the fact that almost every military role, including extras, was played by military or ex-military personnel."
Took the guys out to the 50 caliber machine gun range, and some of the guys I don't think had ever even seen a weapon fire, and certainly had never fired one.
Put the first link in like that. Right. Close your feature. Yeah, pull it to the rear, then let go. And then do it again. All right, you're ready to rock and roll right now.
Of course, they were fed in the field. They got to eat the MREs, and they got real food too, but they got a little taste of what the military is all about.
With various Navy SEALs and Air Force soldiers actually appearing in the film, Transformers received a special screening in Washington, D.C. In addition to using Army personnel in the cast, the film used F-22 aircraft carriers, F-117 Nighthawks, and various other aircraft and equipment. One of the F-22s actually transforms into the Decepticon Starscream. Notably, Transformers was also one of the very first films to be authorized to film around the Pentagon post 9/11. This relationship with the military would continue as the sequels progressed. In fact, the film's Army liaison, Colonel Gregory Bishop, went so far as to call Revenge of the Fallen the biggest joint military operation movie ever made, with the film utilizing equipment from the Army, Air Force, Navy, and the Marines.
For us, it is about, the sexiness of their cars.
Another huge contributor to the film was, of course, General Motors. After all, cars are a pretty huge part of the Transformers universe. Michael Bay already had a relationship with the company after working on various GM commercials. He told Superhero Hype, "I needed to find a car company that can give me a bunch of vehicles and save me $3 million. The deal with GM played a huge factor in Bumblebee's recasting as a Camaro. That and the fact that Bay himself is a big Camaro fan.
This is a classic engine right here. I sold a car the other day.
Oh my God. I just was never going to use the Volkswagen Bug for Bumblebee. It just wasn't going to be in my cars. It just reminded me of Herbie the Love Bug.
Of course, for GM, it was a win-win. They could essentially use the film as a big old commercial. "You're going to see these cars as the heroes," said Dino Bonacci, GM's associate director of branded entertainment. "These vehicles in the movie are literally the stars." The Chevy Camaro wasn't the only GM car repped into the film, of course. There was also the Autobots Jazz, a Pontiac Solstice, Ironhide, a GMC Topkick, and Ratchet, a Hummer H2. Not every bot in the film is a GM though. Amusingly enough, one of the Decepticons, Barricade, is a Mustang. It's a pretty entertaining depiction of the old Ford versus Chevy battle when Barricade faces off against Bumblebee. Reportedly, Ford didn't actually have any say in the vehicle's appearance, so they might not have appreciated that plug. Sound design can really make or break an action movie, and when you're creating battles between giant robots, you really have to make sure that those metallic punches land. Sound designer Eric Adal recounted finding inspiration in strange places for the various robot noises. He said that he and the crew played around with a pogo stick and ended up using that sound for some of the robot movements for Bumblebee, while a slowed down car door opening was used to create the sounds of the Transformers' giant footsteps. The sounds of the transformations themselves largely had to be created from scratch. Supervising sound editor Ethan Van der Rijn said that while they did use the original transformation sound from the cartoons twice in the movie, they beefed it up to create a slicker and more unique effect for all the other transformations. Bumblebee's radio sound effects also posed quite the challenge for the sound team. Adal said that for parts where Bumblebee is in pain, they actually used the pitched down cries of a baby, mixed in with vocals that sound editor Mike Hopkins performed. The soundtrack for the film is pretty interesting as well. Composer Steve Jablonsky, who previously did the music for Bay's film The Island, worked with Hans Zimmer to put together the movie's score. Originally, it was not going to be released commercially at all, but an online petition was put together to convince Sony Records to release it. When it comes to the marketing of the film, both Paramount and Hasbro went all out. For starters, Hasbro created a toy line specifically for the film and released figures of Starscream and Optimus Prime just a few months prior to the film's theatrical release.
You kind of look like that director guy, Michael Bay.
That? No, I do not.
Yeah, you do.
No?
Meanwhile, Michael Bay directed tie-in commercials for Pepsi, Burger King, Panasonic, and of course, General Motors. According to a report from Superhero Hype, Hasbro's team signed over 200 Transformers licensing agreements in over 70 countries following the movie's release.
My first scene actually was with the dogs. It was like, welcome to Michael Bay's set. Release the hounds.
The trainer's worried about your ass, but we are insured at DreamWorks, the Paramount.
Of course, it's not all about the robots. Shia LaBeouf was the first cast member to be officially confirmed for the film. From there, Megan Fox was brought on as Michaela. Both Fox and Shia reportedly gained a few pounds of muscle while preparing for the various action scenes.
Trust me, I said. Ready? 3, 2, 1, action!
Josh Duhamel and Tyrese Gibbons were also brought on as Captain Lennox and Sergeant Epps, and along with their unit, spent a few days in boot camp and worked together with combat controller Ray Bollinger to nail the authoritative, militaristic dialogue.
All right, you scan the windows here, you scan the door, windows, door, windows, door. Stand. Freeze! Hurry up! Everybody is leaving you! People are dying! You are killing them!
Even with skepticism from fans of the original series, the film was a massive hit and broke box office records previously set by Spider-Man 2 for the biggest 4th of July opening. It finished its North American theatrical run with a gross of $320 million and went on to break records internationally. Overall, the film became Michael Bay's 4th highest grossing film, as of this video anyways, banking over $710 million. Transformers was also nominated at that year's Academy Awards for Best Visual Effects, Best Sound Editing, and Best Sound Mixing. With its success, the movie went on to spawn a bunch of equally commercially successful sequels, and even a reboot with 2018's Bumblebee. Honestly, it's hard to ignore the sheer scale of a movie like this. The special effects work is incredible, the action is extreme, and the dedication of those involved is really something to behold. While your mileage may vary, especially with some of the sequels, the first Transformers movie really does hold up as a stellar action flick, an amazing live-action adaptation, and one of Michael Bay's most adventurous filmmaking feats.
Which one do you like the least?
The least?
No, something a little more wicked.
Well, that's all for today, folks. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to hit like and subscribe to stay up to date on all my content. And yeah, if you have any other suggestions, feel free to leave them in the comments below. As always, it's been a pleasure. Nihat here with Film Comics Explained. Thanks for stopping by.
Up.